Hello, 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 greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of greeting across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horace, and welcome back, my dear scholars, once again to the study. Hello there, Julian20, welcome. Hello there, Dr. Zadium, welcome as well. Hello there, Firefly, welcome, 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 welcome. Ah, I hope you're all doing all right. Are you doing well, my dear scholars? Excuse me. I have to hydrate myself. Dr. Zadium, pretty well. Well, pretty well is pretty good, I would say. Julian20, I am well. Thank you. Well, good, 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 good. It's good to be well. It's well to be good. I don't know what else to say about that. Ah, well, it's been a busy time here at the study. Me and dear me. Horace and I have been preparing ourselves for a little journey that will be occurring next weekend. So we've been busy, busy, busy preparing the study, getting a few things straightened out, hoping that the snow will go away. We're still working on trying to get the snow room under control. We think we found a way to finally close that door. Um, we're gonna try it. There's no guarantee it will actually work, unfortunately, but it's better than constantly having to walk in here, getting our shoes wet with snow. It's quite cold, I must say here. And we have had to defrost a few of the books back here, but we are hoping that we'll actually get somewhere with it. Well, yes, it's good to be back with all you dear scholars. I these streams are fully for all of you. I do it because I enjoy having you around here, and I do it to try and share my love of books to all of you. Oh, and speaking of books, we have a brand new book. Well, not brand new, but a new book we're going to be reading this very evening. My dear scholars, how many of you are acquainted with the name L Frank Baum? Anyone? Anyone? Alien 20. Yep. Oh, good, good, good. Dr. Zadium as well. Ooh, all right, all right. Well, I'm sure that you all know L. Frank Baum as being the author of Wizard of Oz and many of the Oz books, up to the first 13, I believe. Oz books were written by him. 13 out of 40. There are quite a few books. Um, you might not know he wrote other books as well. He tried to break out of the what had been the normal his he tried to break free of Oz books. Let's put it that way. He somewhat grew a little bit tired of it and he wanted to branch out. And he wrote many other children's books. Most of them, though, were one-offs, one-off stories that do get referenced in later Oz books. I will say that. So there were a few crossovers. But my dear scholars, there was a very short series of books that he wrote. Only two of them. And they concerned the adventures of a little girl from California named Trot and an old sailor man named Captain Bill. I'm not mispronouncing it. It's not Captain Bill. It's Captain Bill. Captain Bill. And he wrote two books for that series. And starting tonight, we are going to be reading those books. I'm rather excited. I've heard of these tales, but I've never read them, and I've always wanted to read them. So this is a fairly exciting territory for myself, I must admit. Don't you agree, Horace? Oh, well, I mean, I could have made some better choices. I guess a little something a little more exciting. But I think my scholars will like. you know, will like these books. Don't you agree? Hmm, I'm sure they agree. That's odd. Okay. Well, there, Dr. Zadium. Yeah. Yeah. That's. Oh, sorry. Yulian 20. Looking forward to it. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So, with the time we have allotted, and maybe we'll have some time afterwards to do a little discussion, do a little bit of talking, do a little bit of Tunway. No, that sounds awful. I'm not gonna say that. That sounds awful. Do a little bit of relaxing discussions of such needful things as this. Mm, that'd be a nice thing to do. So, my dear scholars, should we not beat around the bush and start our little reading then? What say you, my dear scholars? Yulian 20 ready to go. Oh, eager. Dr. Zadium, go for it. All right. Hi. No problem with that. Uh, all right then. Let me just get my seat adjusted. It's been a while since I've had to read a longer book. Hopefully, I won't tire myself out as I did in the Sherlock Holmes reading. Oh my goodness. All right. So we'll be reading The Sea Fairies by L Frank Baum. And unfortunately, I do not have a picture slide to go with this story. I tried to find one, but most illustrations actually wouldn't fit in this, and trying to make them fit kind of deformed the picture and made it look somewhat terrible. The Sea Fairies by L Frank Baum. Um, dear scholars, would you like me to read the introduction, or shall I skip it to chapter 1? What do you think? Julian 20. Oh, read the intro. Oh, really? Okay. Little word from the author himself. Firefly, how long is it? The introduction is just like one page. It's a very short introduction. Dr. Zadium, we should be properly introduced. Very polite, very polite. Excuse me. Clear my throat a little bit. Excuse me. Mm. All right. Introduction. The oceans are big and broad. I believe 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered with water. What people inhabit this water has always been a subject of curiosity to the inhabitants of the land. Strange creatures come from the seas at times, and perhaps in the ocean depths are many more strange than mortal eye has ever gazed upon. This story is fanciful. In it, the sea people talk and act much as we do, and the mermaids especially are not unlike the fairies with whom we have learned to be familiar. Yet they are real sea people, for all that, and with the exception of Zog the magician, they are all supposed to exist in the ocean depths. I am told that some very learned people deny that mermaids or sea serpents have ever inhabited the oceans, but it would be very difficult for them to prove such an assertion unless they had lived under the water, as Trot and Cap'n Bill did in this story. I hope my readers who have so long followed Dorothy's adventures in the Land of Oz will be interested in Trot's equally strange experiences. The ocean has always appealed to me as a veritable wonderland, and this story has been suggested to me many times by my young correspondents in their letters. Indeed, a good many children have implored me to write something about the mermaids, and I have willingly granted the request. L. Frank Baum, Hollywood, 1911. Wow, 1911. And in Hollywood, nonetheless. Chapter 1. Trot and Cap'n Bill. "Nobody," said Cap'n Bill solemnly, "ever saw a mermaid and lived to tell the tale." "Why not?" asked Trot, looking earnestly up into the old sailor's face. They were seated on a bench built around a giant acacia tree that grew just at the edge of the bluff. Below them rolled the blue waves of the great Pacific. A little way behind them was the house, a neat frame cottage, painted white, and surrounded by huge eucalyptus and pepper trees. Still farther behind that, a quarter of a mile distant, but built upon a bend of the coast, was the village, overlooking a pretty bay. Cap'n Bill and Trot came off into this tree to sit and watch the ocean below them. The sailor man had one meat leg and one hickory leg, and he often said the wooden one was the best of the two. Once Cap'n Bill had commanded and owned the Anemone, a trading schooner that plied along the coast, and in those days Charlie Griffiths, who was Trot's father, had been the captain's mate. But ever since Cap'n Bill's accident, when he lost his leg, Charlie Griffiths had been the captain of the little schooner, while his old master lived peacefully ashore with the Griffiths family. This was about the time Trot was born, and the old sailor became very fond of the baby girl. Her real name was Mary. I think that's how it's pronounced. Mayre. Mary. But when she grew big enough to walk, she took so many busy little steps every day that both her mother and Cap'n Bill nicknamed her Trot, and she was thereafter mostly called. It was the old sailor who taught the child to love the sea, to love it almost as much as he and her father did, and these two, who represented the beginning and the end of life, became firm friends and constant companions. "Why hasn't anybody seen a mermaid and lived?" asked Trot again. "'Cause mermaids is fairies, and ain't meant to be seen by us mortal folk," replied Cap'n Bill. "Oh, hello there, Sophia! Welcome, welcome, welcome to the stream. Glad to see you here. We've just started reading the Sea Fairies. Trot and Cap'n Bill are having a little discussion about mermaids." "But if anyone happens to see 'em, what then, Cap'n?" "Then," he answered, slowly wagging his head, "the mermaids give 'em a smile and a wink, and they dives into the sea and gets drowned." "Suppose they know how to swim, Cap'n Bill?" "That don't make any difference, Trot. The mermaids live deep down, and the poor mortals never come up again." "Oh, thank you for the raid, Crusader!" corrupted. "Welcome, welcome, welcome to the study. Glad to see you here." Where was I? The little girl was thoughtful for a moment. "But why do folks dive in the water when the mermaids smile and wink?" she asked. "Mermaids," he said gravely, "is the most beautifulest creatures in the world. Or the water either. You know what they're like, Trot. They got lovely lays form down to the waist, and then the other half of 'em a fish with green and purple and pink scales all adown it." "Have they got arms, Cap'n Bill?" "Course, Trot. Arms like any other lady, and pretty faces that smile and look mighty sweet and fetchin'. Their hair is long and soft and silky and floats all around 'em in the water. When they come up atop the waves, they wring the water out of their hair and sing songs that go right to your heart. If anybody is unlucky enough to be round just them, the beauty o' them mermaids and their sweet songs charm 'em like magic, so's they plunge into the waves to get to the mermaids." But the mermaids haven't any hearts, Trot. No more 'n a fish has. So they laugh when the poor people drown, and don't care a fig. That's why I says, and I says it's true, that nobody never saw a mermaid and lived to tell the tale. I should note that Baum writes Captain Bill's uh, words language in your typical nautical slang. So if you're when you're hearing me do this accent, I am literally trying to copy the basic sounds of how Baum wrote the text. It's actually pretty difficult. Nobody? Asked Trot. Nobody at all. Then how do you know, Cap'n Bill? Asked the little girl, looking up into his face with big round eyes. Ah, the one thing that can break any story. A little girl's sense of logic. Cap'n Bill coughed. Then he tried to sneeze to gain time. Then he took out his red cotton handkerchief and wiped his bald head with it, rubbing hard so as to make him think clearer. I'm sorry, this makes me laugh. Look, Trot, ain't that a brig out there? He inquired, pointing to a sail far out in the sea. How does anybody know about mermaids if those who have seen them never lived to tell about 'em? She asked again. Know what about 'em, Trot? About their green and pink scales and pretty songs and wet hair. They don't know, I guess, but mermaids just naturally have to be like that, or they wouldn't be mermaids. She thought this over. Somebody must have lived, Cap'n Bill, she declared positively. Other fairies have been seen by mortals. Why not mermaids? Score one for Trot. Perhaps they have, Trot. Perhaps they have, he answered musily. I'm telling you as it was told to me, but I never stopped to inquire into the matter so clost before. Seems like folks wouldn't know so much about mermaids if they hadn't seen 'em, and yet, according to all accounts, the victim is bound to get drowned. Perhaps, suggested Trot softly, somebody found a photograph of one of 'em. That might have been, Trot. That might have been, answered Cap'n Bill. A nice man was Cap'n Bill, and Trot knew he always liked to explain everything so she could fully understand it. The aged sailor was not a very tall man, and some people might have called him chubby, or even fat. He wore a blue sailor shirt with white anchors worked on the corners of the broad square collar, and his blue trouser was very wide at the bottom. He always wore one trouser leg over his wooden limb, and sometimes it would flutter in the wind like a flag, because it was so wide and the wooden legs so slender. His rough kersey coat was a pea jacket, and came down to his waistline. In the big pockets of his jacket he kept a wonderful jackknife, and his pipe and tobacco, and many bits of string, and matches and keys, and lots of other things. Whenever Cap'n Bill thrust a chubby hand into one of his pockets, Trot watched him with breathless interest, for she never knew what he was going to pull out. The old sailor's face was brown as a berry. He had a fringe of hair around the back of his head, and a fringe of whisker around the edge of his face, running from ear to ear and underneath his chin. His eyes were light blue and kind in expression. His nose was big and broad, and his few teeth were not strong enough to crack nuts with. Trot liked Captain Bill, and had a great deal of confidence in his wisdom, and a great admiration for his ability to make tops and whistles and toys with that marvelous jackknife of his. In the village were many boys and girls of her own age, but she never had as much fun playing with them as she had wandering by the sea accompanied by the old sailor, and listening to his fascinating stories. If it helps a little bit of the imagery for with Trot, it's actually just need to note Trot is apparently a year or two younger than Dorothy is. I can't remember exactly how old Dorothy's supposed to be in the Oz books, but Trot is younger than her. So she's a fairly young child. She knew all about the Flying Dutchman and Davy Jones' locker and Captain Kidd and how to harpoon a whale or dodge an iceberg or lasso a seal. Captain Bill had been everywhere in the world, almost on his many voyages. He had been wrecked on desert islands like Robinson Crusoe, and been attacked by cannibals, and had a host of other exciting adventures. So he was a delightful comrade for the little girl, and whatever Captain Bill knew, Trot was sure to know in time. "How do the mermaids live?" she asked. "Are they in caves? Or just in the water like fishes? Or how?" "Can't say, Trot," he replied. "I've asked divers about that, but none of 'em, yes, sorry, hard to do this dialect, but none of 'em ever run across a mermaid's nest yet, as I've heard of." "If they're fairies," she said, "their homes must be very pretty." "Maybe so, Trot, but damp. They're sure to be damp, you know." "I'd like to see a mermaid, Cap'n Bill," said the child earnestly. "What? And get drowned?" he exclaimed. "No, and live to tell the tale. If they're beautiful and laughing and sweet, there can't be much harm in them, I'm sure." "Mermaids is mermaids," remarked Cap'n Bill in his most solemn voice. "It wouldn't do us any good to mix up with 'em, Trot." "Mary! Mary!" called a voice from the house. "Yes, Mamma. You and Cap'n Bill come in for supper." Excuse me. Chapter 2: The Mermaids. The other nice thing about L Frank Baum books is, barring a few, the chapters actually seem to be fairly short. For those who have read any of the Oz books, you know the Oz books are not very long books, so they actually go by pretty quickly, pace wise. The next morning, as soon as Trot had helped wipe the breakfast dishes and put them away in the cupboard, excuse me, the little girl and Cap'n Bill started out towards the bluff. The air was soft and warm, and the sun turned the edges of the waves into sparkling diamonds. Across the bay the last of the fisher boats were speeding away out to sea, for well the fishermen knew this was an ideal day to catch rock bass, barracuda, and yellowtail. The old man and the young girl stood on the bluff and watched all this with interest. Here was their world. Excuse me. "Isn't it a bit rough this morning? Let's have a boat ride, Captain. No, it isn't a bit rough this morning. Let's have a boat ride, Cap'n Bill," said the child. "Suits me to a T," declared the sailor. So they found the winding path that led down the face of the cliff to the narrow beach below, and cautiously began the descent. Trot never minded the steep path or the loose rocks at all, but Cap'n Bill's wooden leg was not so useful on a downgrade as on a level, and he had to be careful not to slip and take a tumble. But by and by they reached the sands, and walked to a spot just beneath the big acacia tree that grew on the bluff. I think I got that right. I'm sure it's not acacia or anything like that. Acacia. Just beneath the big acacia tree that grew on the bluff. Halfway to the top of the cliff hung suspended a little shed-like structure that sheltered Trot's rowboat, for it was necessary to pull the boat reach out of reach of the waves, which beat in fury against the rocks at high tide. About as high up as Captain Bill could reach was an iron ring, securely fastened to the cliff, and to this ring was tied a rope. The old sailor unfastened the knot and began paying out the rope, and the rowboat came out of its shed and glided slowly downward to the beach. Firefly. I note that Peter Pan appeared in book form in 1911 as well, but the play began in 1904. I wonder if that inspired kids to ask Baum for water peoples. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I mean, mermaids themselves have been around for a long time in nautical folklore. I mean, just look at Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. But that is a good point. Peter Pan was a very popular book and play at the time, and mermaids do play a big part in the story. So it might be that that did inspire kids to ask him for a mermaid story. It hung on a pair of da- it hung on a pair of davits. Davits? Davits? It's hard to tell. The page breaks it up. And was lowered just as a boat is lowered from a ship's side. When it reached the sands, the sailor unhooked the ropes and pushed the boat to the water's edge. It was a pretty little craft, light and strong, and Cap'n Bill knew how to sail it or row it as Trot might desire. Today they decided to row, so the little girl climbed into the bow and her companion stuck his wooden leg into the water's edge so he wouldn't get his foot wet, and pushed off the little boat as he climbed aboard. Then he seized the oars and began gently paddling. "Whither away, Commodore Trot?" he asked gaily. "I don't care, Cap'n. It's just fun enough to be on the water," she answered, trailing one hand overboard. So he rowed around by the north. Sorry, I had this word before. By the North Promontory, where the great caves were, and much as they were enjoying the ride, they soon began to feel the heat of the sun. "That's Dead Man's Cave, 'cause a skeleton was found there," observed the child as they passed a dark, yawning mouth in the cliff. "And that's Bumble Cave, 'cause the bumblebees make nests in the top of it. And here's Smuggler's Cave, 'cause the smugglers used to hide things in it." She knew all the caves well, and so did Cap'n Bill. Many of them opened just at the water's edge, and it was possible to row their boat far into their dusky depths. "And here's Echo Cave," she continued dreamily, as they slowly moved along the coast. "And Giant's Cave. And oh, Cap'n Bill, do you suppose excuse me. Oh my goodness. Give me a second. My dear scholars. Oh, uh, Horace and I had a little snack before the reading, so it seems like it's affecting me a little bit. Whew. Pardon me. And Giant's Cave. And oh, Cap'n Bill, do you suppose there were ever any giants in that cave?" "'Pears like that. 'Pears like there must have been, Trot, or they wouldn't have named it that name," he replied, pausing to wipe his bald head with the red handkerchief, while the oars dragged in the water. "We've never been into that cave, Cap'n," she remarked, looking at the small hole in the cliff, an archway through which the water flowed. "Let's go in now." "What for, Trot?" "To see if there's a giant there." Aren't you aren't you afraid?" "No. Are you? I just don't believe it's big enough for a giant to get into." "Your father was in there once," remarked Cap'n Bill, "and he says it's the biggest cave on the coast, but low down. It's full of water, and the water's deep down to the very bottom of the ocean, but the rock roof's liable to bump your head at high tide." "It's low tide now," returned Trot. "And how could any giant live in there if the roof is so low down?" "Why, he couldn't, mate. I reckon they must 'a' called it Giant's Cave 'cause it's so big, and not 'cause any giant man lived there."
"Let's go in," said the girl again. "I'd like to 'splore it."
Again, the writing for Trot does go into a specific dialect, so he removes some certain little bits of words to make her sound fairly young. So if you hear me pronounce words in a very odd manner, I'm simply reading what's on the page. "All right," replied the sailor. "It'll be cooler in there than out here in the sun. We won't go very far, for when the tide turns we mightn't get out again." He picked up the oars and rowed slowly towards the cave. The black archway that marked its entrance seemed hardly big enough to admit the boat, at first, but as they drew nearer, the opening became bigger. The sea was very calm here, for the headland shielded it from the breeze. "Look out for your head, Trot," cautioned Captain Bill, as the boat glided slowly into the rocky arch. But it was the sailor who had to duck, instead of the little girl. Only for a moment, though. Just beyond the opening of the cave was higher, and as the boat floated into the dim interior, they found themselves on quite an extensive branch of the sea. For a time neither of them spoke, and only the soft lapping of the water against the sides of the boat was heard. A beautiful sight met the eyes of the two adventurers, and held them dumb with wonder and delight. It was not dark in this vast cave, yet the light seemed to come from underneath the water, which all around them glowed with an exquisite sapphire color. Where the little waves crept up to the sides of the rocks, they shone like brilliant jewels, and every drop of spray seemed a gem fit to deck a queen. Trot leaned her chin on her hands and her elbows on her lap, and gazed at this charming sight with real enjoyment. Cap'n Bill drew in the oars and let the boat drift where it would, while he also sat silently, admiring the scene. Slowly the little craft crept farther and farther into the dim interior of the vast cavern, while its two passengers feasted their eyes on the beauties constantly revealed. Both the old seaman and the little girl loved the ocean in all its various moods. To them it was a constant companion, and a genial comrade. If it stormed and raved, they laughed with glee. If it rolled great breakers against the shore, they clapped their hands joyfully. If it lay slumbering at their feet, they petted and caressed it. But always they loved it. Here was the ocean yet. It had crept under the dome of the overhanging rock to reveal itself crowned with sapphires and dressed in azure gown, revealing in this guise new and unsuspected charms. "Good morning, Mary," said a sweet voice. Trot gave a start and looked around her in wonder. Just beside her in the water were little eddies, circles within circles, such as are caused when anything sinks below the surface. "Did you hear that, Cap'n Bill?" she whispered solemnly. "Oh, hello there, Sayo. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the study. We're reading The Sea Fairies by L Frank Baum. It's good to have you here." Cap'n Bill did not answer. He was staring, with eyes that fairly bulged out, at a place behind Trot's back, and he shook a little, as if trembling from cold. Trot turned half around, and then she stared too. Rising from the blue water was a fair face, around which floated a mass of long blonde hair. It was a sweet, girlish face, with eyes of the same deep blue as the water, and red lips whose dainty smile disclosed two rows of pearly teeth. The cheeks were plump and rosy, the brows gracefully penciled, while the chin was rounded and had a pretty dimple in it. The, the, the most beautifulest in all the world, murmured Cap'n Bill in a voice of horror, and no one has ever lived to, to tell the tale. There was a peal of merry laughter at this, laughter that rippled and echoed throughout the cavern. Just at Trot's side appeared a new face, even fairer than the other, with with a wealth of brown hair wreathing the lovely features, and the eyes smiled kindly into those of the child. Dr. Zadian Richard Nixon's voice. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do Captain Bill's voice. I'm trying to do an old sailor's voice, pirate voice. It's very difficult to do with this dialect. It's very difficult to do with this dialect. You know, I'm sorry. I'm trying. I am trying, my dear scholars, to come up with unique voices for these characters. This is very difficult. R.
Are are you a mermaid?
Asked Trot curiously. She was not a bit afraid. They seemed both gentle and friendly.
Yes, dear,
Was the soft answer.
we are all mermaids.
Chimed a laughing chorus, and here and there all about the boat appeared pretty faces lying just upon the surface of the water.
Are you part fishes?
Asked Trot, greatly pleased by this wonderful sight.
No, we are all mermaid,
Replied the one with the brown hair.
the fishes are partly like us, because they live in the sea and must move about. And you are partly like us, Mary dear, but have awkward, stiff legs, so you may walk on the land. But the mermaids lived before fishes and before mankind, so both have borrowed something from us. Then you must be fairies, if you've lived always,
Remarked Trot, nodding wisely. Oh, I like Trot. He's great.
We are, dear. We are the water fairies.
Answered the one with the blonde hair, coming nearer and rising till her slender white throat showed plainly. We we're goners, Trot, sighed Cap'n Bill with a white, woebegone face.
I guess not, Cap'n, she answered calmly. These pretty mermaids aren't going to hurt us, I'm sure. No, indeed, said the first one who had spoken. If we were wicked enough to wish to harm you, our magic could reach you as easily upon the land as in this cave. But we love little girls dearly, and wish only to please them and make their lives more happy.
Okay. I suppose that's a good thing. No stranger danger involved in that, I assure you.
I believe it,
Cried Trot earnestly. Cap'n Bill groaned. Firefly fairies usually love little children. Yes, they do. Yes, they do, usually. Usually. There are some fairies which aren't the kindest to people.
Guess why we have appeared to you.
Said another mermaid coming to the side of the boat.
Why?
Asked the child.
We heard you yesterday. We heard you say yesterday you would like to see a mermaid, and so we decided to grant your wish. That was very nice of you,
Said Trot gratefully.
Also, we heard all the foolish things Captain Bill said about us, remarked the brown haired one, smiling, and we wanted to prove to him they were wrong.
I only said what I've heard, protested Captain Bill. Never having seen a mermaid afore, I couldn't be accurate, and I never expected to see one and live to tell the tale. Again the cave rang with merry laughter, and as it died away, Trot said,
May I see your scales, please? And are they green and purple and pink, like Captain Bill said?
They seemed undecided what to say to this, and swam a little way off, where the beautiful heads formed a group that was delightful to see. Perhaps they talked together, for the brown haired mermaid soon came back to the side of the boat and asked,
Would you like to visit our kingdom and see all the wonders that exist below the sea? I'd like to, replied Trot promptly, but I couldn't. I'd get drowned.
That you would, mate, cried Cap'n Bill.
Oh, no, said the mermaids. We would make you both like one of ourselves, and then you could live within the water as easily as we do. I don't know as I'd like it, said the child, at least for always. You need not stay with us a moment longer than you please, returned the mermaid, smiling as if amused at the remark. Whenever you are ready to return home, we promise to bring you to this place again, and restore to you the same forms you are now wearing. Would I have a fish's tail? Asked Trot earnestly. You would have a mermaid's tail, was the reply. What color would my scales be? Pink or purple? You may choose the color yourself.
Look a here, Trot, said Cap'n Bill in excitement. You ain't thinking of doing such a fool thing, are you? Are you?
Course I am, declared the little girl. We don't get such invitations every day, Cap'n. And if I don't go now, I may never find out how the mermaids live.
Again, I really like Trot. She's so full of earnestness. I don't care how they live myself, said Cap'n Bill. I just want 'em to let me live.
There's no danger, insisted Trot.
I do know about that. That's what all the other folks said when they dove after the mermaids and got drowned.
Who?
Asked the girl. I I don't know who, but I've heard tell.
You've heard that no one ever saw a mermaid. You've heard that no one ever saw a mermaid and lived, said Trot.
To tell the tale, he added, nodding. And if we dives down, like they says, we won't live ourselves. All the mermaids laughed at this, and the brown-haired one said,
Well, if you are afraid, don't come. You may row your boat out of this cave and never see us again, if you like. We merely thought it would please little Mary, and we were willing to show her the sights of our beautiful home. I'd like to see 'em, all right, said Trot, her eyes glistening with pleasure.
So would I, admitted Cap'n Bill, if we would live to tell the tale.
Don't you believe us?
Asked the mermaid, fixing her lovely eyes on those of the old sailor, and smiling prettily.
Are you afraid to trust us to bring you safely back?
No, said Cap'n Bill. 'Tain't that. I've got to look after Trot.
Then you'll have to come with me, said Trot decidedly, for I'm going to accept this invitation. If you don't care to come, Cap'n Bill, you go home and tell Mother I'm visiting the mermaids.
She'd scold me how do I say this sentence? She'd scold me into shivers, moaned Cap'n Bill with a shudder. "I guess I'd rather take my chances down below."
"All right, I'm ready, Miss Mermaid," said Trot. "What shall I do? Jump in, clothes and all?" "Give me your hand, dear," answered the mermaid, lifting a lovely white arm from the water. Trot took the slender hand and found it warm and soft and not a bit fishy. I'm trying to see how I can pronounce this name and not and still come across as wholesome because this name can be horribly mispronounced and I don't want to get in trouble. Let's see. Horace, I can hear you laughing. It's not that funny. "My name is Clea," continued the mermaid, "and I am a princess in our deep sea kingdom."
Just then Trot gave a flop and flopped right out of the boat into the water. Cap'n Bill caught a gleam of pink scales as his little friend went overboard, and the next moment there was Trot's face in the water, among those of the mermaids. She was laughing with glee as she looked up into Cap'n Bill's face and called,
"Come on in, Cap'n. It didn't hurt a bit."
"Okay, okay, pardon, a lot of hydration for this one." Chapter 3: The Depths of the Deep Blue Sea. Captain Bill stood up in the boat as if undecided what to do. Never a sailorman was more bewildered than this old fellow by the strangeness of the adventure he had encountered. At first he could hardly believe it was all true, and that he was not dreaming. But there was Trot in the water, laughing with the mermaids and floating comfortably about, and he couldn't leave his dear little companion to make the trip to the depths of the ocean alone.
"Take my hand, please, Cap'n Bill,"
said Princess Clea, reaching her dainty arms towards him. And suddenly the old man took courage and clasped and clasped the soft fingers in his own. He had to lean over the boat to do this. And then there came a queer lightness to his legs, and he had a great longing to be in the water. So he gave a flop and flopped in beside Trot, where he found himself comfortable enough, but somewhat frightened. "Law sakes!" he gasped. "Here's me in the water with my rheumatics. I'll be that stiff. Yeah, I'll be that stiff tomorrow I can't wiggle." I have no idea what he just said. I'll be that stiff tomorrow I can't. Oh, I'll be that stiff tomorrow I can't wiggle. Excuse me.
"You're wiggling all right now," observed Trot. "That's a fine tail you've got, Cap'n, and its green scales is just beautiful."
"Are they green, eh?" he asked, twisting around to try to see him.
"Green as emeralds, Cap'n. How do they feel?"
"Feel, Trot? Feel? Why, this tail beats that old wooden leg a holler. I can do stunts now that I couldn't have done in 1,000 years with old Peg."
"And don't be afraid of the rheumatism," advised the princess. "No mermaid ever catches cold or suffers pain in the water." "Is Cap'n Bill a mermaid now?" asked Trot. "Why, he's a merman, I suppose," laughed the pretty princess. "But when he gets home he will be just Cap'n Bill again." "Wooden leg and all?" inquired the child. "To be sure, my dear."
The sailor was now trying his newly discovered powers of swimming, and became astonished at the feats he could accomplish. He could dart this way and that with wonderful speed, and turn and dive and caper about in the water far better than he had ever been able to do on land, even before he got the wooden leg. And a curious thing about this present experience was that the water did not cling to him and wet him as it had always done before. He still wore his flannel shirt and pea jacket and his sailor cap, but although he was in the water and had been underneath the surface, the cloth still seemed dry and warm. As he dived down and came up again, the drops flashed from his head and the fringe of beard, but he never needed to wipe his face or eyes at all. Trot, too, was having queer experiences and enjoying them. Okay. When she ducked underwater, she saw plainly everything around her, as easily and distinctly as she had ever seen anything above water. And by looking over her shoulder, she could watch the motion of her new tail, all covered with pretty iridescent pink scales, which gleamed like jewels. She wore her dress the same as before, and the water failed to affect it in the least. It in the least. She now noticed that the mermaids were clothed too, and their exquisite gowns were the loveliest things the little girl had ever beheld. They seemed made of a material that was like sheeny silk. No idea what that means. Sheeny silk. Yeah. If that was a bad phrase, I'm sorry about that. I really can't tell. Cut low in the neck, and with wide flowing sleeves that seldom covered the shapely white arms of her new friends. The gowns had trains that floated far behind the mermaids as they swam, but were so fleecy and transparent that the sparkle of their scales might be seen reaching back of their waist, where the human form ended and the fish part began. The sea fairies wore strings of splendid pearls twined around their throats, while more pearls were sewn upon their gowns for trimmings. They did not dress their beautiful hair at all, but let it float around them in clouds. The little girl had scarcely time to observe all this when the princess said, "Now, my dear, if you are ready, we will begin our journey, for it is a long way to our palaces."
All right,
answered Trot, and took the hand extended to her with a trustful smile.
will you allow me to guide you, Cap'n Bill?
asked the blonde mermaid, extending her hand to the old sailor. "O' course, ma'am," he said, taking her fingers rather bashfully.
My name is Merla, she continued, and I am a cousin to Princess Clea. We must all keep together, you know, and I will hold your hand to prevent your missing the way.
While she spoke, they began to descend through the water, and it grew quite dark for a time, because the cave shut out the light. But presently Trot, who was eagerly looking around her, began to notice the water lighten, and saw they were coming into brighter parts of the sea.
We have left the cave now, said Clea, and may swim straight home.
Excuse me. Excuse me again.
I suppose there are no windy roads in the ocean,
Remarked the child, swimming swiftly beside her new friend.
Oh, yes, indeed. At the bottom of the way, at the bottom the way is far from being straight or level,
replied Clea. But we are in mid-water now, where nothing will hinder our journey, unless... She seemed to hesitate, so Trot asked,
Unless what?
"Unless we meet with disagreeable creatures," said the princess. "The mid-water is not as safe as the very bottom, and that is the reason we are holding your hands."
What good would that do?
asked Trot. "You must remember that we are fairies," said Princess Clea. For that reason, nothing in the ocean can injure us. But you two are mortals, and therefore not entirely safe at all times, unless we protect you. Trot was thoughtful for a few moments, and looked around her a little anxiously. Now and then a dark form would shoot across their pathway, or pass them at some distance, but none was near enough for the girl to see plainly what it might be. Suddenly, they swam right into a big school of fishes, all yellowtails, and of very large size. They must have been hundreds of them lying lazily in the water, and when they saw the mermaids they merely wiggled to one side and opened a path for the sea fairies to pass through.
Will they hurt us?
Asked Trot.
No, indeed, laughed the princess. Fishes are stupid creatures mostly, and this family is quite harmless.
How about sharks? Asked Cap'n Bill, who was swinging gracefully beside them, his hand clutched in that of pretty Merla.
Sharks may indeed be dangerous to you, replied Clea, so I advise you to keep them at a safe distance. They never dare attempt to bite a mermaid, and it may be they will think you belong to our band, but it is well to avoid them, if possible. Don't get careless, Cap'n,
Added Trot. I surely won't, mates, he replied. You see, I didn't used to be afraid o' sharks, 'cause if they came near I'd stick my wooden leg at 'em. But now, if they happen to fancy these green scales, it's all up with old Bill.
Never fear, said Merla. I'll take care of you on our journey, and in our palaces you will find no sharks at all.
Can't they get in? He asked anxiously.
No, the palaces of the mermaids are inhabited only by themselves. Is there anything else to be afraid of in the sea? Asked the little girl, after they had swum quite a while in silence. One or two things, my dear, answered Princess Clea. Of course we mermaids have great power, being fairies, yet among the sea people is one nearly as powerful as we are, and that is the devilfish. I know, said Trot. I've seen 'em. You have seen the smaller ones, I suppose, which sometimes rise to the surface go near shore, and are often caught by fishermen, said Clea. But they are only second cousins of the terrible deep sea devilfish to which I refer. Those ones are bad enough, though, declared Cap'n Bill. If you know any worse ones, I don't want an introduction to them.
The monster devilfish inhabit caves in the rugged mountainous regions of the ocean, resumed the princess, and they are evil spirits who delight in injuring all who meet them. None live near our palaces, so there is little danger of your meeting any while you are our guests. I hope we won't, said Trot.
None for me, answered Cap'n Bill. Devils of any sort ought to be given a wide berth, and devilfish is worser ner sea serpents.
Oh, do you know the sea serpents? Asked Merla, as if surprised.
Not much I don't, answered the sailor, but I've heard tell of folks as have seen 'em.
Did they ever live to tell the tale? Asked Trot.
Sometimes, he replied. They're just so fur. Again, it's really hard to translate as sailor talk. They're just orful creatures, mate.
How easy it is to be mistaken, said Princess Clea softly. We know the sea serpents very well, and we like them. You do? Exclaimed Trot. Yes, dear. There are only 3 of them in all the world, and not only are they harmless, but quite bashful and shy. They are kind-hearted too, and although not beautiful in appearance, they do many kind deeds and are generally beloved. Where do they live? asked the child.
The oldest one, who is king of this ocean, lives quite near us, said Clea. His name is Anko.
More hydration. How old is he? Inquired Captain Bill curiously.
No one knows. He was here before the ocean came, and he stayed here because he learned to like the water better than the land as a habitation. Perhaps King Anko is 10,000 years old. Perhaps 20,000. We often lose track of the centuries down here in the sea. That's pretty old, isn't it? Said Trot. Older than Captain Bill, I guess.
Again, I like Trot. Somewhat, chuckled the sailorman. Somewhat older, mate, but not much. Perhaps the sea serpent ain't got gray whiskers.
Oh, yes, he has, responded Merla with a laugh, and so have his two brothers, Unco and Inco. They each have an ocean of their own, you know, and once every 100 years they come here to visit their brother Anko. So we've seen all three many times. Why, how old are mermaids then? Asked Trot, looking around at the beautiful creatures wonderingly. We are like all ladies of uncertain age, rejoined the princess with a smile. We don't care to tell. Older than Captain Bill?
Poor Captain Bill, he's getting dragged through the mud here.
Yes, dear, said Clea, but we haven't any gray whiskers, added Merla merrily, and our hearts are ever young.
Trot was thoughtful. It made her feel solemn to be in the company of such old people. The band of mermaids seemed to all appearances young and fresh, and not a bit as if they'd been soaked in water for hundreds of years. The girl began to take more notice of the sea maidens following after her. More than a dozen were in the group, all very lovely in appearance, and clothed in the same gauzy robes as Merla and the princess. These attendants did not join in the conversation, but darted here and there in sportive play, and often Trot heard the tinkling chorus of their laughter. Whatever doubts may have arisen in the child's mind, though, through the arrogant tales of her sailor friend, she now found the mermaids to be light-hearted, joyous, and gay, and from the first she had not been in the least afraid of her new companions.
How much
How much farther do we have to go? Asked Cap'n Bill presently.
are you getting tired?
Merla inquired. No, said he, but I'm sorter anxious to see what your palaces look like. Inside the water ain't as interesting as the top of it. It's fine swimmin', I'll agree, and I like it, but there ain't nothing special to see that I can make out.
That is true, sir, replied the princess. We have purposely led you through the midwater, hoping you would see nothing to alarm you until you get more accustomed to our ocean life. Moreover, we are able to travel more swiftly here. How far do you think we have already come, Captain?
Oh, 'bout 2 mile, he answered.
Well, we are now hundreds of miles from the cave where we started, she told him.
You don't mean it, he exclaimed in wonder.
Then there's magic in it, announced Trot soberly. Yes, true, my dear. To avoid tiring you and to save time, we have used a little of our fairy power, said Clea. The result is that we are nearing our home. Let us go downward a bit, now, for you must know that the mermaid palaces are at the very bottom of the ocean, and in its deepest part. Okay.
All right. I'll give you a choice, my dear scholars. Shall we stop here for now, or shall we do one more chapter? What say you, my dear scholars? Because again, these chapters aren't very long. but I want to know how you feel, my scholars. Julian 20, one more chapter. Oh, all right. Everyone else all right with that? One more chapter? All right, we got a little bit more water. Drinking so much water, I might as well be a mer person. Dr. Zadian, one more. All right. Chapter 4, The Palace of Queen Aquarine. Trot was surprised to find it was not at all dark or gloomy as they descended farther into the deep sea. Things were not quite so clear to her eyes as they had been in the bright sunshine above the ocean's surface, but every object was distinct, nevertheless, as if she saw it through a pane of green-tinted glass. The water was very clear, except for this green shading, and the little girl had never before felt so light and buoyant as she did now. It was no effort at all to dart through the water, which seemed to support her on all sides.
I don't believe I weigh anything at all,
she told Cap'n Bill. No more do I, Trot, said he, but that's natural, seeing as we're under water so far. What bothers me most is how we manage to breathe, having no gills like fishes have.
Are you sure we haven't any gills?
She asked, lifting her free hand to feel her throat. Sure, ne'er the mermaids haven't any either, declared Cap'n Bill.
Then, said Trot, we're breathing by magic.
The mermaids laughed at this shrewd remark, and the princess said,
You have guessed correctly, my dear. Go a little slower now, for the palaces are in sight.
Where? Asked Trot eagerly.
Just before you. In that grove of trees?
Inquired the girl. And really it seemed to her they were approaching a beautiful grove. The bottom of the sea was covered with white sand, in which grew many varieties of sea shrubs with branches like those of trees. Not all of them were green, however, for the branches and leaves were of a variety of gorgeous colors. Some were purple, shading down to light lavender, and there were reds all the way from a delicate rose pink to vivid shades of scarlet. Orange, yellow, and blue shades were there too, mingling with the sea greens in a most charming manner. Altogether, Trot found the brilliant coloring somewhat bewildering. These sea shrubs, which in size were quite as big and tall as the trees on earth, were set so close together that their branches intertwined. But there were several avenues leading into the groves, and at the entrance to each avenue the girl noticed several large fishes, with long spikes growing upon their noses.
These are swordfishes,
remarked the princess, as she led the band past one of these avenues. Well, it's really funny. I wish I could show you the illustrations to this book. I have the illustrated copy. They draw the swordfishes in the illustration as fish with literal swords on their noses. It's really it's great. It's great. Again, I wish I could show the illustrations. I unfortunately can't.
Are they dangerous?
Asked Trot.
Not to us,
Was the reply.
The swordfishes are among our most valued and faithful servants,
Guarding the entrances to the gardens which surround our palaces. If any creatures try to either excuse me again. Horace, next time remind me not to have that for a snack, okay? If any creature try to enter uninvited, these guards fight them and drive them away. Their swords are sharp and strong, and they are fierce fighters, I assure you. I've known 'em to attack ships and stick their swords right through the wood, said Cap'n Bill.
Those belong to the wandering tribes of swordfishes, explained the princess.
These who are our servants are too sensible and intelligent to attack ships. The band now headed into a broad passage through the gardens, as the mermaids called these gorgeous groves, and the great swordfishes guarding the entrance made way for them to pass, afterward resuming their posts with round and watchful eyes. As they slowly swam along the avenue, Trot noticed that some of the bushes seemed to have fruits growing upon them. What these fruits might be, neither she nor Cap'n Bill could guess. The way wound here and there for some distance, till finally they came to a more open space, all carpeted with sea flowers of exquisite colorings. Although Trot did not know it, these flowers resembled the rare orchids of earth in their fanciful shapes and marvelous hues. The child did not examine them very closely, for across the carpet of flowers loomed the magnificent and extensive palaces of the mermaids. These palaces were built of coral, white, pink, and yellow being used, and the colors arranged in graceful designs. The front of the main palace, which now faced them, had circular ends connecting the straight wall, not unlike the architecture we are all familiar with. Yet there seemed to be no windows to the building, although a series of archways served as doors. Arriving at one of the central archways, the band of sea maidens separated, Princess Clea and Merla leading Trot and Cap'n Bill into the palace, while the other mermaids swam swiftly away to their own quarters. "Welcome," said Clea in her sweet voice. "Here you are surrounded only by friends, and are in perfect safety. Please accept our hospitality as freely as you desire, for we consider you honored guests. I hope you will like our home," she added, a little shyly.
We are sure to, dear princess,
Trot hastened to say. Then Clea escorted them through the archway and into a lofty hall. It was not a mere grotto, but had smoothly built walls of pink coral inlaid with white. Trot at first thought there was no roof, for looking upward she could see the water all above them. But the princess, reading her thought, said with a smile, "Yes, there is a roof, or we would be unable to keep all the sea people out of our palace. But the roof is made of glass to admit the light."
"Glass!"
cried the astonished child.
"Then it must be an awfully big pane of glass."
"It is," agreed Clea. "Our roofs are considered quite wonderful, and we owe them to the fairy powers of our queen. Of course, you understand there is no natural way to make glass under water." "No, indeed," said Cap'n Bill. And then he asked, "Does your queen live here?"
"Yes, she is waiting now in her throne room to welcome you. Shall we go in?" I'd just as soon,"
replied Trot rather timidly, but she boldly followed the princess, who glided through another archway into a small room, where several mermaids were reclining upon couches of coral. They were beautifully dressed and wore many sparkling jewels.
"Her Majesty is awaiting the strangers, Princess Clea," announced one of these. "You are asked to enter at once." "Come, then," said Clea, and once more taking Trot's hand, she led the girl through still another arch, while Merla followed just behind them, escorting Cap'n Bill. They now entered an apartment so gorgeous that the child fairly gasped with astonishment. Ooh. The queen's throne room was indeed the grandest and most beautiful chamber in all the ocean palaces. Its coral walls were thickly inlaid with mother of pearl, exquisitely shaded and made into borders and floral decorations. In the corners were cabinets, upon the shelves of which many curious shells were arranged, all beautifully polished.
The floor glittered with gems arranged in patterns of flowers, like a brilliant carpet. Near the center of the room was a raised platform of mother of pearl, upon which stood a couch thickly studded with diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and pearls. Here reclined Queen Aqua- Aquarine, a being so lovely that Trot gazed upon her spellbound, and Cap'n Bill took off his sailor cap and held it in his hands. All about the room was grouped other mother of pearl couches, not raised like that of the Queen, but upon each of these reclined a pretty mermaid. They could not sit down as we do, Trot readily understood, because of their tails, but they rested very gracefully upon the couches, with their trailing gauzy robes arranged in fleecy folds. When Clea and Merla escorted the strangers down the length of the great room toward the royal throne, they met with pleasant looks and smiles on every side. For the sea maidens were too polite to indulge in curious stares. Ah. They paused just before the throne, and the queen raised her head upon one elbow to observe them. Hmm.
Welcome, Myrie, she said, and welcome, Cap'n Bill. I trust you are pleased with your glimpse of the life beneath the surface of the sea.
I am, answered Trot, looking admirably at the beautiful face of the queen. It's all mighty curious and strange like, said the sailor slowly. I'd no idea you mermaids were like this at all.
Allow me to explain that it was to correct your wrong ideas about us that led me to invite you to visit us, replied the queen. We usually pay little heed to the earth people, for we are content in our own dominions. But of course, we know all that goes on upon your earth. So when Princess Clea chanced to overhear your absurd statements concerning us, we were greatly amused and decided to let you see with your own eyes just what we are like.
I'm glad you did, answered Cap'n Bill, dropping his eyes in some confusion as he remembered his former description of the mermaids.
Now that you are here, continued the Queen in a cordial, friendly tone, you may as well remain with us a few days and see the wonderful sights of our ocean. I'm much obliged to you, ma'am, said Trot, and I'd like to stay, ever so much. But Mother worries just dreadful if we don't get home in time. I'll arrange all that, said Aquarine with a smile. How? I will make your mother forget the passage of time, so she will not realize how long you are away. Then she cannot worry.
So they're basically going to brainwash Trot's mother. I don't know if I trust these mermaids. I mean, they seem nice enough, but they're going to be played around with people's minds and memories.
Can you do that?
Inquired Trot.
Very easily. I will send your mother into a deep sleep that will last until you are ready to return home.
Kintron, Trixie Beans. Yes. Also, hello there, Kintron. Welcome. We're on our final chapter for the evening, or morning, or afternoon, or whatever time it is. So now they're gonna put her to sleep. What will happen when she wakes up and she realizes what the time is? I mean, there has to be a way she's gonna be able to tell, like, oh, she was gone that long.
Just at present she is seated in a chair by the front window, engaged in knitting.
The queen paused to raise an arm and waved it slowly to and fro. Then she added,
Now your good mother is asleep, little Mary, and instead of worries, I promise her pleasant dreams. Won't somebody rob the house while she's asleep?
asked the child anxiously. Wow, Trot really is smart, thinking up covering all the bases here. Union 20, that poor woman, I find that so disturbing, maybe because I am a mom. Oh, I see. So you could sympathize with her then.
No, dear. My charm will protect the house from any intrusion. That's fine!
Exclaimed Trot in delight. Yeah, delight. It's just wonderful, said Cap'n Bill. I wish I knew it was so. Trot's mother has a awful sharp tongue when she's worried. When she's worried,
You may see for yourself,
declared the Queen, and waved her hand again. At once they saw before them the room in the cottage, with Mary's mother asleep by the window. Her knitting was in her lap, and the cat lay curled up beside her chair. It was all so natural that Trot thought she could hear the clock over the fireplace tick. After a moment the scene faded away, when the Queen asked with another smile,
Are you satisfied? Oh, yes, cried Trot. But how could you do that? But how could you do it? It is a form of mirage, was the reply. We are able to bring any earth scene before us whenever we wish. Sometimes these scenes are reflected above the water, so that mortals also observe them.
I've seen 'em, said Cap'n Bill, nodding. I've seen mirages, but I've never knowed what caused 'em, afore now.
Whenever you see anything you do not understand, and wish to ask questions, I will be very glad to answer them, said the Queen. One thing that bothers me, said Trot, is why we don't get wet, being in the ocean with water all around us. That is because no water really touches you, exclaimed the Queen. Your bodies have been made just like those of the mermaids, in order that you may fully enjoy your visit to us. One of our particular qualities is that water is never permitted to quite touch our bodies or our gowns. Always they remain a very small space, hardly a hair's breadth between us and the water, which is the reason we are always warm and dry. I see, said Trot. That's why you don't get soggy or withered. Exactly, laughed the Queen, and the other mermaids joined in her merriment.
I suppose that's how we can breathe without gills, remarked Cap'n Bill thoughtfully.
Yes, the air space is constantly replenished from the water, which contains air, and this enables us to breathe as freely as you do upon the earth.
Wow, he actually is going into a great deal of speculation on how mermaids work.
But we have fins,
said Trot, looking at the fin that stood upright on Cap'n Bill's back.
Yes, they allow us to guide ourselves as we swim, and so are very useful.
They make us look more finished, said Cap'n Bill with a chuckle. Then suddenly becoming grave, he asked, How about my rheumatics, ma'am? Ain't I likely to get stiffened up with all this dampness?
No, indeed, Aquamarine answered. There is no such thing as rheumatism in all our dominions. I promise no evil result shall follow this visit to us, so please be as happy and contented as possible.
Oh my goodness. Well, Captain Bill has some weird obsession about his rheumatism, doesn't he? So, let's go over to the chat area and we'll chat a little bit before we close. I can find where I am. Oh, there we are. Hello, hello, hello. Oh my goodness. Dr. Zames, stiffness is important. No, I'm not gonna say that. No, 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 no. This is a nice stream. This is a nice, wholesome stream. We do not speak of like that. um, this is actually my first. This is not my first time reading a story with Trot in it. I did read the Oz book with Trot in it, which is much later. Um, but I really, really like Trot as a character. I really do. She's a little bit more earnest than Dorothy was. I suppose her being a younger child, she has a lot more curiosity about the world around her. So so which makes it actually kind of refreshing to read because she is constantly asking about what's going on, and so it makes it easier as us readers to learn more about the world the story is set in. Also like Captain Bill, he's kind of fun. Um, yeah, L Frank Baum, he tried to write a lot of other Oz books. There was this. There was Sky Island, which is the sequel, which I will get to after this book is done. He wrote many other books. Trying to remember all of them. The Kingdom of Mo, which is a very weird book, even by Baum standards. John Doe and the Cherub, which concerns a human-sized gingerbread man and a test tube baby going on an adventure together. A genderless test tube baby, I should mention, going on an adventure together. Um, Queen, I think it's Queen Nyx of Inks, which is at times pure nightmare fuel. It's really kind of freaky. Union 20, say what? You heard me. I did not. You heard me. The cherub of the title is a test tube baby who is genderless. Yeah, Firefly. Zixie. Yes, Queen Zixie of Inks. That's the name. So wait, is that Death Stranding? It was the Death Stranding before Death Stranding. Um, Queen Zixie of Inks is it's a freaky book, especially the what are they called, the Roly the Roly Rogues. Oh my goodness, the Roly Rogues are freaky. Um, it's actually also one of the few non-Oz books which got a movie adaptation. Queen Ixie of Zinx, what Queen Zixie of Inks, Queen Zixie of Inks was adapted into the silent film The Magic Cloak of Oz, even though it has nothing to do with Oz. Although in maps it is revealed that Inks is near Oz. I think it's to the south of Oz. I can't remember for certain. Then he also wrote the Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which is in the Oz canon. I'm trying to think of any of the other ones that he wrote that got that put together. Oh, Firefly, I can go pull the book if you like and look. Oh, you've got the book. Oh, yeah. If you want. Can't remember. That's a book I've again. That's another book I've never read, and it's kind of sad that Baum's non-Oz books kind of get overlooked because some of them are really good. Often they are really surreal. Baum had this really creative way of creating these very strange locations and unique ideas and creatures. Um, trying to think of any of the other ones. There's so many of them. I'm mainly trying to remember of all the cameos from one of the later books of Oz. Well, not later. The fifth book of Oz, which has a huge number of cameos from the books. I'm trying to recall if there are any that I missed. Alien 20 somewhat nightmarish. Yes, yes. I would not want to live in any of Bomb's worlds. They are always really dangerous and really nightmarish. I'm just trying to remember. It's very difficult to remember some of these things. Um, in fact, I wonder if the Magic Cloak of Oz is in the public domain. Because if it is, might make for a good movie showing, I would think. That might be a fun movie showing because it is really, really nightmarish and really, really, really weird. Um, so yeah, oh, given our Alien 20, that would be fun. Well, now you say it's fun now. When you see the movie, it's a little bit more creepy. Again, they do the Roly Rogues in there, and they are just frightening as heck in live action. Kintron, 1914. It should be clear. Oh, good, good, good. I will put that on a list on potential movie streams. That might be a fun one. I'll have to double check to make sure there's nothing offensive in it because 1914 and all that. So there's a really, 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 really bad Wizard of Oz silent film adaptation, which is ugh, just the worst. Um, I should talk about my schedule next week. In that, I don't know at this point. I don't know if I'm going to do a stream on Tuesday or not. Like I said, Horace and I are going on a journey next weekend, starting on Thursday, so we are not going to be streaming that day. I might record some shorts from the study that I'll put on my YouTube channel, but I don't know for certain. It all depends on how much time Horace and I have to work with, because we're actually pretty busy on a few things in the libraries here. Um, but I will let everyone know the more information I get. And if I don't do any streams, well, I will have a stream ready by the week after. That's for certain. I will say I'm going to hold off on doing the final stream for Monkey Island until the week after. I think that's for the best because I really, really, really want to concentrate on it and not have myself distracted by other things. Firefly, no land is just across the northeast corner of the deadly desert that surrounds the rectangular shaped Oz. No land is bounded on the southeast by Maryland and on the west by Ix. Yep, thank you so much, Firefly. Yeah, Baum created essentially this huge, huge fairy land continent, more or less, with all these different countries from his various books surrounding it. It's really fantastic. And if you can find a proper map of all of them, it's really interesting to look through. But I see now that it is getting late, so I think I know for a fact that Sophia Ignace is reading Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, another L Frank Baum book. So I think we will raid her tonight. And Firefly, this intro references the map, but it isn't included. Ah, that's a shame. I've seen the map and it's really neat. So I think we'll close out for tonight, and I say unto you, my dear scholars, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, till we meet each other again at the study. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Bye bye.